Have you ever looked out at your perfectly manicured neighborhood and thought, what would happen if someone literally just turned off the water? Well, welcome to today's Explainer. We're unpacking a super relatable neighborhood clash that completely escalated into a full-blown legal battle. It's a story of tradition versus environmental reality, pitting 50 years of lush green lawns right up against the harsh, dry realities of the modern desert.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Our battleground here isn't just, a neighborhood sidewalk. We are looking at the official legal setting of the Arizona Office of Administrative Hearings in Phoenix. This is where homeowner Suzanne Thomas faced off against the Woodland Hills Improvement Association, which is her own HOA, in a dispute that asks a fundamental question about property rights, community identity, and a rapidly changing climate.
So, here's the docket for today's Explainer. We'll start with the Great Grass Dispute, run through the petitioner's case, look at the board's defense, break down this chaotic voting battle, and wrap it all up with the final verdict.
All right, Section 1, the Great Grass Dispute.
Now, we are not just talking about a little squabble over some unpulled weeds here. We're looking at a 53-year-old community in Tucson, Arizona that is going through a massive, and I mean highly contentious, transition from green lawns to desert dirt. For half a century, Woodland Hills was famous for this lush, park-like setting. But when a newly elected HOA board decided to basically pull the plug on planting the annual winter grass, well, things blew up. So the crucial point really anchors on the community's legal bedrock, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, the CC&Rs. If you look at Section 8.1, it says residents have to pay their pro rata share for maintenance, explicitly listing mowing grass, caring for the ground, sprinkler system. To the petitioner Suzanne Thomas, this exact phrasing means the HOA is legally bound to maintain that grass. For her and her supporters, a grassless courtyard is a straight-up breach of contract.
Moving on to Section 2, the petitioner's case.
Let's actually look at the timeline here, because it really shows how this conflict built up over the decades. Back in 1973, Woodland Hills was planted with year-round Bermuda grass. Fast forward to the 2010s, the tree canopy had gotten way too thick for the Bermuda to survive. So they struck a compromise. They'd plant winter ryegrass. That gave them nice green lawns for about 5 months out of the year. But then hit 2025, and the new board abruptly stops planting the grass entirely. They just left the grounds as bare dirt while planning out this future desert zero-scape.
So, what's Suzanne's argument? She basically brought forward 3 core points. First off, she warned that cutting off the water would absolutely shock and kill the community's 100-year-old legacy mesquite trees. Second, she argued that the $30 a month fee they historically paid for grass seed is just standard maintenance, right? Not some extraordinary special assessment like the board was claiming. And third, she pointed straight to property values. She actually brought data comparing their neighborhood to an identical twin community right next door that had let its grass die. And guess what? The green community commanded significantly higher prices per square foot. Plus, she pointed out that the resulting dust storms from the bare dirt were really taking a heavy toll on the community's senior citizens. And this brilliantly illustrates the real ecological stakes we're talking about here. Thomas presented an email from a master gardener at the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension. You see, because these heritage mesquite trees have been watered by shallow lawn sprinklers for over 50 years, their root systems have adapted. They're completely shallow now. The expert explicitly warned that if you just stop that regular watering, sure, they might not drop dead tomorrow, but they will absolutely decline and eventually die without that water.
All right, let's flip the script. Section 3, the board's defense.
So the HOA board, led by President Mary Claire Lazar and Treasurer Sean Capriva, they had a fiercely different perspective. They weren't just trying to ruin the neighborhood's vibe. They argued they were the only ones actually willing to face the community's environmental and fiscal reality. I mean, look at this number. According to the HOA treasurer, grass maintenance and watering were eating up 74% of the entire community budget. 74%! The board essentially said, look, it is totally fiscally irresponsible to spend 3/4 of our money on winter ryegrass that only looks good for 5 months before it completely dies off in the Arizona heat. The board's defense really rested on some pretty harsh realities. First, their 53-year-old infrastructure. We're talking galvanized pipes, lampposts, ironwork. It desperately needs urgent funding for replacements, and they simply can't afford it if they're, as they put it, grass poor. Second, and this is massive, Tucson is facing severe water shortages. They're looking at a potential loss of up to 77% of their Colorado River water allotment. To put that into perspective, that is a staggering amount of water just gone.
For the board, switching to zero-scaping, which means landscaping that needs little to no irrigation, isn't just a financial decision, it's an ethical obligation. They envisioned a park with native plants, cacti, and maybe some artificial turf islands that attract pollinators and actually provide year-round beauty, not just 5 months of green followed by dead summer grass.
But to actually execute this massive pivot, the board leaned on a very specific legal mechanism. Let's quickly define a special assessment. Under their rules, it's basically a fee levied on top of regular dues. And the kicker? It requires a 2/3 majority vote from the members to pass. The new board dug their heels in and insisted that the annual money used to buy that winter grass seed was absolutely not standard maintenance. It was a special assessment. And because of that strict legal label, it needed a supermajority of the community to get approved.
Which brings us to Section 4, the voting battle. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how two totally different groups can look at the exact same set of numbers and both declare themselves the winner. In April 2025, the community voted on the fate of the grass. Look at the tally on the left. Out of 19 homes, 11 voted yes to plant the grass and 8 voted no. Suzanne Thomas and her camp looked at this and said, hey, 11 beats 8. That is a simple majority. Fire up the sprinklers, the grass wins. But the HOA board looked at that exact same piece of paper and said, actually, hold on. We established this as a special assessment. That requires a 2/3 majority, which means we need 13 votes. You only got 11. Therefore, the measure fails and the grass is dead.
And that takes us to our final act, Section 5, the final verdict.
So, with the neighborhood at a total unyielding deadlock and literally blowing dust into people's living rooms, an outside authority had to step in. We find ourselves right back in the virtual courtroom of the Arizona Office of Administrative Hearings. Judge Velva Moses Thompson has heard the whole shebang. The testimony about the heritage mesquite trees, the 74% budget train, the totally conflicting vote interpretations, and of course the 50-year precedent of having a green lawn. And now she prepares to issue her binding order.
It all boiled down to this one ultimate question. Did the HOA board actually violate Section 8.1 of their governing documents by refusing to plant the winter ryegrass? Does a reference to mowing grass written into a 1970s legal document literally force a neighborhood to keep planting a lawn in the 2020s?
Well, here's the judge's exact ruling. She concluded that the association is, in fact, not required to plant grass under Section 8.1. The logic she used here is actually fascinating. The judge basically said, look, the CC&Rs mandate the maintenance and the mowing of grass if there actually happens to be grass there. But absolutely nowhere in those historical documents does it legally mandate the planting of new grass seed every single year. Even though they had this informal decade-long habit of paying for seed, that didn't magically or legally amend their governing documents.
So the concrete outcome is pretty crystal clear. The HOA board wins, Suzanne Thomas's petition gets formally dismissed, the board's vision for a financially strict, drought-friendly desert landscape completely overrides a half-century of tradition. The 53-year-old reign of the winter ryegrass in Woodland Hills is officially over, and the new zero-scaping project can now begin.
And you know, this whole dispute brilliantly illustrates a much larger shift happening all around us. Woodland Hills is just a microcosm, really. As water allotments continue to shrink and maintenance costs just skyrocket, are the days of the traditional, lush American neighborhood lawn officially numbered? It might actually be time to take a really close look at your own HOA CC&Rs. Because honestly, you never know when the water might get turned off. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer, and keep exploring the fine print.